Hi everyone, before we go into the podcast, I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm super grateful for your continued loyalty and support. If you could do me a quick favour, if you could give me a review on Apple Podcasts, it really helps the algorithm and it will help this podcast go up the lists. If there are any subjects or topics that you want me to cover, then please do reach out to me on DM on LinkedIn and I will do my best to find the best guest for that subject or topic. This is the Absolute Business Mindset Podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will interview entrepreneurs, business owners and careerists. We will delve into their journey to success, key life milestones, and go deep into their area of expertise. Get ready to learn from other successes and failures. Today we have Mickie Kennedy, who is CEO of eReleases, where he helps entrepreneurs tell their story by press releases. Hello, Mickie. How are you?
I'm good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. So we're going to jump a little bit around in the podcast. We're going to jump forward and then jump back in the chronology. But let's go straight into your e-releases. So what drove you 22 years ago to set up e-releases?
So about 24 years ago, I was working for a telecom startup. And one of the things that I had to handle there was sending out the press release. And we had like 190 journalists, and it was done via fax. And so my job was to program 100 numbers into the machine. That's as many as it held, hit send, took all day. And then the next day, delete those numbers and add 80 or 90 more and hit send again. We started to get a lot more phone calls from journalists saying, could I just email them the release? Because all they had was the paper copy. And we published a lot of numbers and statistics, so they felt it was easier to work with that in a Word document. So that's when the light bulb went off, and I said, email seems a lot more easier to send out a press release than faxing. And I spent about a year reaching out to journalists and asking them if I could send them press releases by email. And most all of them at that time said, sure. It was new and novel, and they were, willing to do it. And I just started focusing on covering different beats and different industries and reaching out to those journalists, and then just started sending releases to them, as my customers would find me, and I would, get their press release out to journalists. So it was literally that your job required you to do something, and you sort of saw a corner of the market that you could go into. Who was your first client? Who was the first people that you worked with? It was actually the company I was working for. They wanted to see how it worked, and so we took their press release and we sent it out, and it did really well. I ensured that all of the journalists that we had been faxing were included, and so they were my first customer, and my boss there was a big champion for me to start this.
How has press releases changed over the period of 22 years?
So I think one of the biggest things that has changed with press releases is the attention to style. When I first began, everything was very adherent to AP style, and the Newswire, we started working with PR Newswire over the years and including them in our distribution. We're real vigilant about the style of a press release, and it had to be proper. Everything had to be the proper format. Initial cap headlines, except for prepositions and all this stuff. And over the years, they don't care anymore. You can send a press release with all title caps or all initial cap, and the prepositions, they don't care anymore. There's a lot less adherence to the rules. And I think that there's been a relaxation with social media and just people in general that, as long as we're communicating clearly, that's the most important aspect. I had been told 20 some years ago, one grammatical error in your press release and you'll be banned by the media. I've never saw that happen, but I do know that the media are a lot more forgiving now. I've seen, we had a press release from someone who was, English wasn't their native language, and there was some awkwardness to it that we tried to help them get out of it, but they weren't paying us for writing, so there was only so much we could do. But still, they did really well. The media, you knew contextually who this founder was, and that he's from Latin America, and so the writing's a little bit different. But despite that, they saw a story there, and that was the important part. What's the meat? What's the newsworthy story? The hook, the angle, and focused on that, and not so much on the actual language.
So, I've got here, and this is probably a bit of an unfair question, but which publisher, which people are the hardest to get into? I'm assuming national papers are the hardest. Something like the Washington Post or New York Times are the hardest to get into to generate a story. But if you're trying to get a story ripple through in the US through sort of state and then national, how do you do that you get that ripple effect that keeps on going to up to sort of national level?
What we find is that the really newsworthy press releases that do get picked up by like the New York Times and the Washington Post and places like that, it generally starts with them. And then a lot of the minor papers sort of pick it up. It's the opposite of what I would think. I would think it would start with the minors, and then the big company, the big newspapers find it. But I think that the bigger papers are really always on the hunt for something that's really unique and something really shareable, because at the end of the day, they're like gatekeepers for their audience, and they're constantly needing to feed them stuff that they feel will be interesting. And so for that reason, I find that the big papers generally pick up something really newsworthy fast. Then it's followed by maybe some news wires like UPI or Reuters or the Associated Press, which they themselves don't move press releases. They write the article based on the press release because they control the licensing of that content. And then it just sort of rolls out from there. Trade publications can be responsive, especially if they have an online presence where they're publishing content, almost like a blog. But I find that if the online sites heavily mirror the print, then there's more of a delay, because usually, the print trade publications take a little bit longer to produce. So it might be a little bit slower to get on in those instances.
I really thought it would go the other way around, that it would go local, state, then regional, then national, rather than picked up a national and disseminates all the way through.
Right. And I think that the reason that the big nationals pick it up first is because, they are constantly monitoring the wire and looking for something. And so when they hit on something that they think is unique, it sort of is permission from a lot of local and smaller papers to say, oh, this is cool. And we'll write an article about it, and we'll put our different little spin on it. Might be more of a local angle or something like that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so thank you for that. We're gonna now go back to your education. So you did a degree in English and anthropology. So what made you decide, because they're not necessarily the most natural fit between subjects. Why did you choose it, and how did you get on?
Well, I was drawn to anthropology just because of the study of cultures and how things work and how we interact with society and each other. I was just always fascinated by that. English, I loved literature. I loved to read. And, I didn't know what I was going to do with that. I did end up getting a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing with an emphasis in poetry, which is very esoteric. It's I just assumed when I was done with that I'd be waiting tables or something like that. But I ended up trying waiting tables when I was in grad school, and I wasn't good at it. It takes a lot more skill and strength than you would think, being on your feet for like 10, 12 hours in a day. And so I ended up going to that telecom job and, working there. I was like employee number 3 of a startup, and I wore a lot of different hats, some sales, some marketing, and of course, working on press releases and getting those out to the media.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all, tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match you, your disease, with the best treatment. X-Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X-Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
Okay, we'll talk about poetry in a minute because I've got a couple of questions on that. But one of the things that was shared with me was that you have an enjoyment of British science fiction.
Yes, Doctor Who especially.
Doctor Who, right? I did guess that it would probably be Doctor Who. So where did this start? Like, when did you start watching? And
so when I was young, I lived in rural North Carolina, and we didn't have cable. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't be till I was probably in the 8th grade that the cities closest to me got cable, but where I was, it wasn't going to happen. And at some point, someone knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I'm here with PBS. We're part of a North Carolina grant, and here's a special round antenna we'll put on your TV, and you'll get this PBS channel from Raleigh that plays all this educational stuff. And in the evening and on the weekends, they would play stuff like British sitcoms, Are You Being Served, Monty Python's, and on the weekends they would play a few hours of Doctor Who. I think starting with the John Pertwee and then Tom Baker years. And so I was like really, wanting to be entertained, and there it was. So that was great. And I still follow the new reboot of the series as well.
What do you think of Jodie? I can't remember her surname. What do you think about the female doctor?
I don't feel the chemistry towards her as I feel towards others, but I'm also a man, and I don't know if there's some innate misogyny there or something that's happening. I do feel that the show is trying to be so woke and progressive in a way, even, with the companions and stuff like that, that I'm not sure. I mean, I'm going along for the ride, but it's not my happiest years with the franchise. But
you're still watching?
I still watch it. Yep. Big fan.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we're going to jump around a little bit. And so what is MEK Enterprises?
Well, that was the original company that I set up.
Okay.
And so when I started my business, I started it almost like a newsletter. And I had several of these newsletters, and I would just send out content, and people would sign up, and I'd put the journalist on these lists and stuff like that. But I also did stuff that was consumer oriented as well. And I did it under a different website called Day Tips. And we had like a joke list and a horoscope list and all of this content that I produced. And for that, it was all like advertising based. And I just had it all under the umbrella MEK Enterprises with a couple of DBAs. One was the DBA under Day Tips, and then the one for e-releases. The Day Tips one didn't survive the .com crash. My advertising revenue went, from a few $1,000s a month to zero very fast, and it just didn't look like it was going to rebound. And so I just focused solely on e-releases from then forward.
So that's interesting. So you the .com bubble basically killed one of your businesses.
It did. It just evaporated. At the same time, e-releases tended to get a little bit stronger. And so I just focused on it. And I don't know if it was because one was B2C and the other one was B2B, but e-releases has done really well during most recessions and downturns in the market, because I think that people look at where we're spending our marketing dollars, and when money gets tight, where can we spend it more strategically? And with PR, you can get such a leverage out of just spending a few $100s. You could potentially get tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars from a very effective newsworthy PR campaign.
Okay, so help me here, right? And I'm thinking about the difference between PR/branding, which I know are not necessarily exactly the same thing, but there seems to be, in my mind anyway, and I want you to sort of clarify and educate me. There seems to be PR branding, which is very much around creating, which is a little bit more art format, versus something like sales and marketing, which is sometimes art format, but it's a little bit more metrics. It's a little bit more data driven. Would you agree with that? Is there that sort of distinction between the two?
Yes, that's definitely it. That being said, I do tell people to measure their PR in ways that they can. For example, all else being the same, and now you've started a PR campaign and you're seeing a few results in articles being published and additional traffic to your website. Are you seeing an uptick in revenue? Are you seeing a change in conversions on your sales pages and things like that? What a lot of people find is the traffic they get from earned media generally converts much higher, because when someone reads an article, say in the New York Times, and then goes to your website, they want to do business with you. They don't want to open a new window and price shop and see if I can get it cheaper on Amazon. They want to do business with you. So the conversions usually increase from that traffic.
Okay. And what's the impact of social media to press releases? Because people now release things on Twitter with 240 characters, and that's in their essence, that's their release of information. How has social media impacted e-releases?
It's definitely an avenue for getting content out there and sharing with particular journalists. There are some journalists that are very responsive with social media, and so you're more likely to reach them through a tweet than through an email. And so that's changed quite a bit. The newswire that we work with, PR Newswire, which is the oldest and largest newswire in the United States, they accept social media influencers as journalists in their platform. For example, there are some fashion Instagrammers who are have a larger reach than, say, a small trade publication. And so they're recognizing that. And so they're giving them access to be able to log into PR Newswire and create really custom feeds so that it's collecting the type of releases that they're really interested in.
So tell me a little bit, I don't know PR Newswire, and that might just be because I'm not in your sort of business arena. So are they someone who sort of shares stories with other national or regional papers and journalists?
Right. So they are a platform that reaches journalists. It historically used to be tied to newsrooms, so they would do satellite broadcast and custom wire feeds directly into newsrooms, and they would access it on an intranet, and you would just have all these streaming headlines that you could click through and read the press release. They do have a journalist login now that's web-based, so it's not tied to one particular newsroom and one particular location, and it makes it very customizable so that you could go in and say, I want to cover, say, the fashion news. So you'd look at the fashion headlines and feeds, and then you could even create customs like, I don't cover ready to wear. I don't want stuff with these certain keywords. I do want anytime this is mentioned or this is mentioned. So you can really customize the feed so that when you log into your feed, it's exactly the type of content that you're looking for.
Right. This might sound really naive because I'm just not in your world, and it's absolutely fascinating speaking to you about this. So is there on PR Newswire, is there literally a sort of update every few minutes with stories, with headlines, and it's
actually in real time by seconds. So sometimes when it's really busy in the morning, closer to 9 a.m., every time you hit refresh, the content can be changing.
Right. And journalists track that to see what stories might be of interest.
Right. Yeah. The newswires are a really great place for journalists to look for content. So many people are familiar with Help a Reporter Out, which works as a different model where a journalist says, I'm working on this particular story. I'm looking for these type of people to include in the story. And then several people pitch themselves to Help a Reporter Out. That used to work really well when not many people knew about Help a Reporter Out, but now it's not usual for 200 to 400 people to respond to one, call for someone. So the competition is really great. And then secondly, it takes a lot of work for journalists to put that story together for Help a Reporter Out and say, this is what I want. And then to go through everything. So few stories are written that way. Some larger feature stories are, which I think is why it's important. But most stories are just written on the fly as this content's just coming through and trying to figure out what would make a good story, what would be worth sharing with my, audience.
And on the wire, is there a search functionality? Can you search for place or subject or whatever? You can
Right. So if you're a local journalist and you're only interested in local news, you can actually restrict it based on where the content is meant to be, whether it's tagged as local or, lots of different abilities to look at it. It doesn't really get into a lot of really defined demographics, but you can hone in on local. You can't, it is industry based, the feeds and stuff like that. And then you do get to do those searches on top of it, as well as, being able to restrict the type of the feed, customizing the feed and making it more specific to you.
But there's no algorithm behind it that's pushing one to another story. It's literally
not at the moment. I mean, I think that's naturally, could come. I think that would be controversial because if everybody's paying $1,000 to get a national release out to PR Newswire, I don't want to be pushed down to the bottom while someone else is pushed to the top. So I think that might be one thing that would keep them from utilizing an algorithm. But that being said, I think that we are moving towards using artificial intelligence to help make better decisions. And I think that if it makes the journalist's job easier, it's going to make those platforms more useful for the journalist. And that creates a win-win for them. Thank you so much.
That's absolutely fascinating. Right, we're going to jump around again. Your poetry nights on Monday nights. What's the fascination with poetry? It's a very beautiful way of creating written language, but what's the attraction for you?
I think I'm drawn to poetry because you can create a complete thing in one small poem. Even if it's a longer poem, it's one thing, it's completed. It's shareable. It's got this language in it that you like, or has a rhythm that matters to you. And I think that there's something about creating these tiny little worlds that I find fascinating. I have never really sat down and said, I want to write a novel and commit myself to whether it's 6 months or 2 years to just writing the same thing. There's something about sitting down, whether it's a half an hour or a couple of hours, and coming away with a finished product. It might need to be edited at some point, and there's always revisions, but it's a little world and a little window into something that you brought into the world, and it's unique and it's beautiful and creative.
Have you had anything published?
I have. I've had a lot of little things published in like small presses and little lit magazines and things like that. During the pandemic, I sent a lot of stuff out, and I think I got about 45 poems published last year or forthcoming. But I haven't published a book yet. I did have a book accepted by a publisher, but they're moving very slowly. So I haven't even gotten the contract from them yet, but they said, congratulations, we want to publish you. The next step is if you accept to review the contract. And so that's where it's at right now. They haven't given me the contract yet, but I am excited about getting a book published. I've completed about 3 so far, and I've written a lot over the past 2 years, and I think I'll probably start slowing down at some point. I am fascinated with the idea of writing a novel or a mystery or something like that. So I've ordered some books just to look. I don't know if I'm ready to commit to something that large yet, but I am going to explore it and just see what the process would be.
Because one of the things I sort of and ah about is writing a business book, and I've got a couple of ideas on what I would do, but it's, as you say, it's that commitment or knowing that for a business book, I reckon probably 6 months I could probably write it and sort of edit it and get people to review it and think about it. But like 6 months worth of every day writing, editing, just it fills me with dread, if I'm honest. It's like I just like, because I can do these podcasts. I love doing these podcasts. I speak to great people and really understand people and sort of think about how people's businesses and different things they do. That's like nice short. It's a bit like your poetry. I spend an hour with someone, we have a great conversation, and then we publish in a couple of weeks' time. With actually writing a book, and one of my friends recently has just had her book. She's just finished and she's just getting it published now. And I literally haven't spoken to her for 6 months, because every time, no, I can't. I'm writing my book. So I do get that sort of, that larger project is quite a commitment, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. So, but Monday nights you go and you go with a group, do you, and read your poetry or share stories?
Right.
Poetry.
Yeah, we bring poems. We've been doing it on Zoom during the pandemic. We might continue with that because we've added a couple of members. One from Nepal. He used to be part of our original group and moved to Nepal a few years ago. And because it's Zoom, we invited him back in. And then we have someone from Virginia as well. Yeah, we share a poem that we wrote over that week or something we want comments on. Then we take turns reading and sharing our criticism and, if there's a difficult part for us understanding the poem or something that didn't flow right or something like that, we just help each other, work on our process and revise to a better poem.
Does it ever get heated?
No, we're too good-natured and friendly. It's actually harder to get harsh criticism sometimes. It can take 15 minutes to work up to, really saying, I don't like this poem. It's not your best and stuff like that. But I think we're getting better at that. And for me, I have a thick skin when it comes to that. So I'm the first to say, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Just let me know.
Okay, awesome. All right, now let's go back to press releases. What's the worst one that you've ever seen?
I see a lot of bad ones. We get a lot of things that people want to send out as a press release that aren't press releases. We get the equivalent of rants. Right. Usually they're consumer driven against a company, but sometimes we get someone who's within an industry and they just want to call someone out and rant about them. And it's just, we can't move a release like that. We do tell them that you would have to turn it into a third person style, and anything really inflammatory you could include in quotes. Right. And you could bridge this into a press release, but 99% of them are just like, no, I'm not interested in that. It was just this cathartic thing I wanted to get out, and now I wanted to share it with the world. There are a lot of releases like that. The most common releases that we get are the really safe milestones that a company has. So they might announce a new HR director. They might announce that their website has now gone mobile responsive. Those releases don't generally do very well because very few people are going to be interested in that content. Yeah. For example, the VP or director of HR that you hired, really maybe your local newspaper would be interested in that, and maybe one or two trade publications. But outside of that, no one really is. So I would always say, try to email and pitch those directly to those 2-3 publications, and you would have much better results for a lot less money.
Because it's like, I got married 12 years ago, and my mother-in-law thought that it would be really important that we put it in a national newspaper that we were going to get married. And I just went, why? Like, what is like? No one really cares. She's like, well, it's for you can keep the paper, and if there's anyone that doesn't know that that's not immediate family, they'll read the paper and see it. And we didn't end up doing it, but it was one of the it really, and they still do that. They don't do it as much. They usually do like marriages and obituaries and things like that. But the content is drastically reduced over the years now, that it's just a couple of famous people or whatever that they do in the newspaper. But yeah, it's those sorts of things. People get caught up in their themselves, and then sometimes there's not a story. It's, as you said, it was more like a rant. It's more like a feeling that they're having rather than an actual story.
Right. And I think for small businesses, so many of them don't know what they should be writing about. So they just pick something that they've seen, like a new hire or something like that. And it's just unfortunate, because if you're going to use a service like mine, where you pay money to go, have a release emailed to journalists and sent out over the wire, that's a real obligation of money. And I would like there to be the chance that you get some media pickup from that. And when you send those types of releases, the likelihood is very small.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So why don't you tell me about your masterclass that you've got, that you're starting or started?
Right. So it's one of the things that I wanted to do was to teach my customers to do more strategic press releases. So I put together this less than 1 hour free masterclass that talks about press release strategies that you can use. It's available for free to anyone, less than an hour. It's at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And basically it talks about the types of press releases that do get media attention. For example, a survey or study-based press release does really well. The media loves numbers, they love statistics, and people are like, well, we don't have a survey. I'm like, you can put together a survey. You could use SurveyMonkey, you can use Google Forms. You just send the link out. You could send it out to your customers. You could send it out to your leads. And what I've had a few of my customers do is send it out to have a third party send it out. We had a local auto repair shop in Pennsylvania. Long story short, their website was a brochure page provided by the Yellow Pages, and that went away, and they had to put up a new website, and it wasn't ranking. And so someone said, if you get a lot of automotive industry trade publications linking to you, you'll rank very fast, very quickly. And so someone had suggested that they do press releases. And I told them, I said, if you want to ensure that you get auto industries picking you up, you have to be really newsworthy. And nothing that a local auto repair shop is doing is very newsworthy. So I suggested the survey. And so they didn't have anyone to send it out to, but I had them reach out to a independent trade association of other local auto repair shops across the U.S. And they just sent the link to their members, and they got I think 700 or 800 auto repair shops that filled out the survey. And they were also able to co-brand the trade association with the survey, giving it more credibility. And they did really well, but they also took my lesson of always throw 1 or 2 left ball questions in a survey, because sometimes those can be really effective. And for them, it was, what's the strangest thing a customer has left in their car while being repaired? And it was just an open field where people just typed in what it was, and it blew up. They got picked up so many places. People used it to fit the space they had. I think there was over 50 strange things, but sometimes people would list the top 10 or a curated list of 20 or whatever fit the space that they were utilizing. But it was very entertaining, and their local newspaper ended up picking it up as well. And they got some other papers to pick it up as well. But within 3 months, they were ranking number 1 in their market, just by getting those links and that credibility. So it worked very effectively for them. But that's something that anyone can do. And in my masterclass, I go through that and several other things that you can do so that you're not sending out the safe, boring press releases that don't get picked up. Because the last thing I want people to do is try a press release, send it out, nothing happens, and they think that press releases can't work and PR doesn't work. And you really have to try a campaign of 4 to 6 releases to determine whether you've done a proper campaign. And secondly, you have to do different topics that have a hook or something, an edge to them that will make them stand out as opposed to the other releases that are out there.
And there's different tiers to when you're investing in press releases. talk me through. So if I wanted to release something and there's different options. So I think you can go like to national, to region. I'm not sure if it's geography that's defining it, but what are the sort of different? Do you have tiers on your?
Yeah, on our service we do offer tiers. They're based on word count, which is something that the Newswire charges for extra words. We know it really doesn't cost anything, but their reasoning behind keeping the word counts is that the less words you have, the more concise you are, the more likely a journalist is going to appreciate the content. If it was unlimited, every release would probably swell to 1,400 words, and it would just be arduous for journalists to have to go through and review so much content that's just filled with fluff and stuff like that. So ours are based off of the number of industry targets and the number of words. And all of our releases go out nationally to journalists, and it's a custom national distribution over PR Newswire, which normally charges $1,000 to move a release nationally. And through us, the releases can be anywhere from a couple $100 to $400 on average. Particularly for a new customer that comes in through a discount or something like that.
Again, I feel I'm asking a silly question, but I don't know if it is. So when you're doing like Google and you're doing Google AdWords, and you can go onto a website and be able to see all the keywords relating to, I don't know, sports or football or whatever it is, and they'll give you sort of suggested keywords which resonate well on Google. Is there something similar to that for press releases?
There really isn't. I think that at the end of the day, you're writing for your target audience. So I just say use language that's natural. Avoid smaller words or things like that acronyms. Like I found that sometimes I'll write copy on my website and never use the word press release. I'll just say, make sure your release is. And you got to remember the search engine is going to give more credence if the phrase press release is used there rather than just the abbreviated release or something like that. Right. So I just say, write your copy naturally. Make sure that the keywords that are natural within your industry appear within it. I think that's the best thing, because I think that anytime you try to write something with an AI tool based on keyword density and so many other factors, it's obsolete in a little bit of time when Google figures out that a lot of mediocre content has figured out what the ranges we prefer. So now we have to change the algorithm so that we're discerning stuff from a different approach or algorithm. So I just say, rather than try to beat the system, just try to write something that reads naturally and includes the keywords that are a good fit for your industry.
Okay, awesome. Something I read was that you see the value of being a contrarian.
Correct. In my strategies that I talk about, one of them is being contrarian. And when everybody in the industry is saying one thing, if you just add your voice to say, I agree, you're not going to stand out. Yeah. And the competition for people or experts to profile in a story is going to be huge. But if everybody's saying this and you're saying the exact opposite, your chances of getting picked up is so much greater. Journalists are supposed to be objective, and they're supposed to have both positions. And so many times a story goes to press without that other contrarian position because they don't have anybody that's out there saying it. And so they're not going to, volunteer that. But if you look at, say, electric cars, most everybody is like, oh, this is great. It's great for the environment. It's the future. And if you're a level-headed contrarian and you say with a rational argument that, hey, while electric cars are great and are probably the future, we really shouldn't be embracing them greatly right now because the metals and minerals used for the batteries are taken out of the ground in a non-environmental way that has abusive labor practices. And we haven't solved what we're going to do with these batteries at the end of their life. Are we just going to create another environmental nightmare? And until that's, solved, we really shouldn't be rushing in. And, that no one's going to say that person is crazy. It's a very reasonable, rational argument, but because you're the only person out there sort of, with being a wet blanket on the electric car market, it's very likely you could get picked up in several articles that discuss electric cars, just to be that other voice, that other side.
It's like I completely agree. Whenever the general public or the masses are doing one thing, I always think to myself, I'm going to do the opposite. And giving an example, when you're based in the US, you might not have seen, but Ronaldo, the footballer, moved a bottle of Coca-Cola at one of his.
I did read that.
Yeah, and he said you should drink water, and that 4 billion of Coca-Cola's share price. So when I saw that, I went, right, I'm going to buy some Coke shares. So I only bought like a couple of £100 worth. It wasn't it wasn't like loads and loads, but I just bought them, and I thought, well, I'm like, it is such an institution. Coca-Cola, they are bound to rebound, and I often think like everyone saw that story and everyone was like, oh, it's so terrible that the market and poor Coca-Cola, and yes, he should be drinking water, and it was all this about it. And I just suddenly thought, well, the 4 billion of the stock market has just dropped off of Coca-Cola, and it's one of my sort of one of my fascinations and sort of what I try, I don't always get it right, but I try to think in that contrarian way, because when a mass movement is moving of people, whether it's a populist in politics or religion or sports or whatever it is, actually taking that step back and actually just perhaps going in the opposite direction, I think is really valuable for me personally, but actually very valuable for almost everyone that I speak to that hears that as well.
I definitely agree. I have a guy who is a friend of mine who's an investor, and whenever there's a massive recall or Chipotle's here in the U.S. closed down a couple of years ago because of a health crisis and thing, he's like, it's going to go away. I don't know if this is the bottom of their stock price right now, but I'm going to buy it as it goes down, knowing that it's going to rebound and do really well. And he's always done well with that approach.
Thank you. What is your day-to-day activities that you do for your business now? Well, how involved are you in the operational side?
I am not involved in the day-to-day operations of the business. I'm more involved in the marketing and the strategic stuff that matters. I do look at like the employee processes and are there things that we could do to give customers a better experience and things like that. So I'm constantly trying to measure things within the business and trying to measure the type of customers that we're bringing in and what we can do that makes a difference. One of the things we used to do with new customers is we'd send them this crazy welcome box with all of these, crab chips from Baltimore, fun little toys, and just quirky stuff. And someone told me that she thought it was really unprofessional. And so I thought about it and I said, maybe she's right. So over a 6-month period, we only sent the boxes to half of our customers. And then we measured them over the next 2 years to see if one population was a better customer. And she was exactly right. The people who did not receive the box, but instead we just shipped one of the things in the box was one of my books on how to write press releases. If I just sent the book and a nice letter, that population of customer used us more, spent more money, and we're just better customers. And so she was right where the zany box of fun stuff with quirky things fits my personality. But for whatever reason, it didn't make the impression that I was wanting to make with the customers. So I did change that. And I listen to feedback and criticism. And if I can measure it, I will. So that was one of the things I split tested. And it was like overwhelming that every time I was sending out that box, even though it was costing me $20 to $30 to send all of that stuff out, it was costing me several $100s over the lifetime of that customer.
That's amazing. That's amazing to actually test that and actually see the results. And where are the glasses, Mickie?
They're here. Usually when I'm reading or something, I don't wear them. But yeah, these are my quirky glasses. I got them for Pride last year, and I just said, I'm not going to take them off. So.
No. All right, we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. they're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. It's up to you. So first one is, what's the best decision that you made?
I think the best decision I made was partnering with PR Newswire. It was very expensive to include them as part of our distribution, but they've been really good partners and a really great value for my customers.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I think the best piece of advice is to email your customers and communicate regularly with them. I don't know why, but early in my career, I didn't really have a customer newsletter and I wasn't emailing my customers regularly. Oh. And then once I started, I found that every time I sent out an email, I'd get all these sales from old customers. And then I've started events where 4 times a year I have specials, and it's sort of event driven, and it does really well. So just communicating with my customers more regularly, because I'm so focused on bringing the new customer on board, I wasn't thinking about what happens once they become a customer.
Oh, that's really interesting, because it's the difference between, as you say, the new clients, you think that's where you're generating, but cross-selling or selling slightly different to your actual market is really important as well. Right. And you've built the trust with them, haven't you? That's sure. The thing. You've earned their trust and you've got their business. So really important point. Thank you for making that. Who's helped you most in your career?
I would probably say there's a marketer named Perry Marshall, and I've worked with him over the years. I was part of his roundtable for many years, and I got a lot of advice from him on marketing practices, best practices. That's where I learned to start emailing your customers, and then to do the event sales where twice a year I'd have a promotion. Started with once a year promotion, and I was like, it works so well, could I get away with it twice a year? And now I'm doing it 4 times a year, and it just does great. So I would say I've gotten some of my best marketing ideas from him.
Awesome. Any regrets?
There's always regrets. There's the press release that we took that we shouldn't have because it just sort of blew up.
Can you tell me which one that was?
There was one about a guy who was sending out press releases for his company. It was his father's company. And then he sent out a press release saying he's in business for himself, and his father's company doesn't treat people right, and said all this, stuff like that. And it just got into this like little war. And I was just like, I wish I had not taken that from the beginning. It was sort of on the fence of acceptability when we got it, and it just imploded. The father's lawyers sent a cease and desist to him, and then he had to pass it along to us. And it was just back and forth. I don't know what their relationship is today, but it was just, you get embroiled in that stuff and there's no winner.
Oh, geez, that's a lesson to be learned, isn't it?
Yeah, don't get involved in family squabbles.
Family, yeah. I always think so. So I coach people, business coach people, and it doesn't happen often, but sometimes someone set up a business and then brought a family member in, husband, wife, son, daughter, cousin, uncle, whatever. And whenever it happens, and it doesn't happen a lot, but I can think of one specifically, she brought her children into the business. It was her business, but she made it into a family business. And they were providing a service. It wasn't like a widget or a product. But I just immediately thought, right, we just need to be a bit mindful of this, because your relationship with your children is so different to professional relationships that you've got with other people. Don't get me wrong, it can work, and in some cases it does work, but there's something slightly dysfunctional about bringing children into their business. So I'm always a little bit careful with family-run businesses, because there's so many, like you think like in a large organization there's politics. In a family it's 20 million times worse. So you got to be careful of those sorts of things. Okay, what are you most proud of?
I I think that there's been a couple of customers that we really were able to help, and they make me really proud. We had a guy who came from Russia and defected and used the post-Cold War political environment of Russia as his reason, and it was one of the first cases that did that. And he had a very successful business career here as an entrepreneur. And then the political winds changed, and they told him that he no longer met the qualifications, that they decided that, Russia's a good standing country. We have good relationship with them. It's not a situation where you need to flee. And so it got to the point where he had a flight back to Russia that had been arranged by the state. And he said that one of the things he did was he testified against several Russian mobs. And he said, as soon as I land, they've already decided, who's going to take me at the airport and kill me. And so we sent out a press release about it. And I think he had 4 or 5 days before his flight back to Russia. And his local congressperson saw the article that was printed about it. I think the New York Times or one of those places picked it up immediately. It could have been the Wall Street Journal. I can't recall. But they intervened, and he's still here in the U.S. today. And that happened over, I think, well over a decade ago. And he sent me the best email and said, this isn't, embellishment. You literally saved my life by getting that out there, because I had done everything I could, and I, had used a lawyer during the entire appeals process and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I was getting nowhere. And I really believe that if I had flown back to Russia, I would be a dead man.
That is an incredible story. You should put that in a book.
I should. Yeah.
That's what you should write your book about. What does legacy mean to you?
I think legacy for me is complicated because I think that part of it is my art, my poetry and stuff like that. But there's also the whole business legacy of something that you created. I don't know necessarily I'd want my children to be involved in my press release business, but if they did want to cut their teeth on learning something like marketing or business processes, I'd be open to, opening that up to them and showing them. But I think that at the end of the day, the people that you touch positively and you share with, that's your legacy, and hopefully you've improved the world rather than, been a negative influence or something like that. And for me, my real, mantra has always been to help the small business owner because it's really tough for them. And, I know that they can't afford to spend $1,000 on PR Newswire. So, me being an option out there for them of spending just a couple $100 and getting the same, type of, service and actually even expanded distribution is a real win-win. And I feel really great about that because I'm, giving them these great opportunities.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
The website's ereleases.com. All my social media is on the lower right. There's a LinkedIn link that goes directly to my LinkedIn. I do check my LinkedIn and generally respond to email messages there. If you have any questions about press releases or looking to explore press releases, just go to ereleases.com. There's chat. And there's also a phone number that you can call. You'll speak to an editor. We have no salespeople. There's no commissions. There's no quotas or anything like that. If we feel like we can help you, we're, very honest and upfront about that. And again, if you're looking to do a PR campaign, learn those strategies because, strategic press releases always get media pickup, and you can really create a winning PR campaign by just watching that free masterclass that I mentioned at ereleases.com/plan.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Mickie. I really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.